to the Nerdy Grail and welcome to my review and discussion on the Fantastic Four First Steps movie. Now, I literally only just got out the cinema about an hour or two ago watching this movie. I know it's been out for a couple of days, but I've only just managed to get around to see it, and so I thought I'd give you my thoughts and so whether I think it's actually a good movie, a good start to the new phase, because apparently this film is the film that kicks off Phase 6, setting up all the future events with Doom and everything with Robert Downey Jr. And just to see whether I agree with what the internet has been saying, because I've read lots of reviews. I tried to keep away from spoilers as best I can, but you know, it's a bit difficult nowadays to keep away from spoilers, so I did sort of know about the post-credit scene a little bit beforehand, but from what I could gather from online reviews and non-spoiler reviews, is that a lot of people seem to think of this movie as very middle of the ground, very mid-tier Marvel. You know, it's not necessarily the worst movie ever, but not necessarily anything groundbreaking. And I think, to be perfectly honest, I sort of agree for the most part. I would say that this movie, as just a brief rundown, is very run-of-the-mill. It's definitely not the worst Marvel film I've ever seen, but I definitely wouldn't say there was anything in it that literally blew me away. It was sort of by the books, by the numbers, you know, hit point A, hit point B, hit point C, and here we go, here's the ending of the movie. You know, but I will say that for the most part, I thought all the acting and all the actors and everything did a very good job. And as a core team for the Fantastic Four, I would say that, at least for me, based on all the Fantastic Four films and versions we've had so far, I would say these are definitely up there for me personally as probably the best that we've seen in an iteration in movie form. You know, like Fan Four Stick from 2015, I wasn't a huge fan of. The original Fantastic Four movies from the early 2000s were pretty good. They were a bit fun, but they're very for the time. And then the other Fantastic Four movie from the 90s, I believe it was. I've not actually seen that one. I've seen clips and stuff. But I think, personally for me, this current one, the Fantastic Four First Steps, this is the team that I connected to the most. On also a personal level with some of them as well. But I'll get into that as I discuss the movie. But how am I going to break down this movie? Well, I will do a section on the plot. I will do sections on the characters, which I might integrate into the plot itself. And also, I will also talk about the post-credit scenes as well, and what I think they mean, and what they could be signifying for the future of the MCU going forward. So, without any further ado, let's jump straight into my review on the Fantastic Four First Steps. Okay, and I should say before I go into anything, spoiler warning, although let's be real, a lot of people now have either seen the movie or have seen the spoilers online because it's hard to avoid the spoilers. But I will say, spoiler warning if you haven't seen Fantastic Four First Steps. I would recommend going to see it though anyway, just even if you're just a casual Marvel fan. But yeah, this is your final spoiler warning to click off this video if you don't want to hear or see any spoilers for the movie. So I think what we'll do is we'll start with the plot of the movie. So, you know, we're on Earth 828. That is the universe that we're in. We don't actually start in the universe of the MCU. And you notice that from the beginning with the Marvel Studios logo. They don't play like the Avengers theme or show you all clips from previous movies and stuff. It is almost like a generic Marvel movie, like when you go to watch the Sony Spider-Man universe and stuff like that. And you're introduced to the Fantastic Four, which are already 4 years in the making. They're being advertised to the world by, I think it's the Ted Gilbert Show, who is basically telling us, giving us a bit of backstory about them, what happened to them. They were a space exploration, went off to do some research, got hit with cosmic energy, came back with superpowers, and they've been saving people ever since. You get a nice montage of them defeating lots of different villains and bad guys, getting to see their powers, which I think is really, really nice. And I'm glad they don't spend too long on a backstory. You know, and they set up the plotline really, really well. You know, you get to see all the characters develop and show their personality shine through. But I'll talk more about that in the characters section. So you get to see Reed and also Sue, who are talking about their life. Sue is actually taking a pregnancy test, and it turns out she's pregnant. They're worried about what that might mean for the future, as they've been trying for years but haven't been successful. But they are finally successful, you know, and then they end up going on this mission because they get invaded by Silver Surfer, who comes down, who's known as, what was it? I had to write it down. Shalaba Baal, who comes down warning the Fantastic Four of Galactus, that Galactus is incoming and his planet has marked their planet for death, and they're next, and so they need to hug their loved ones and try and escape as best they can, or live every moment that they've got till the last, because unfortunately you're doomed. And so they go on a quest to try and stop Galactus from ever actually coming to Earth in the first place. They go up there, they find Galactus. Galactus tells them that actually, I will spare your planet if you give me your child, because your child is the key to my freedom, the key to solving my everlasting hunger. So if you give me your child, I'll spare the Earth. Obviously, Sue and Reed and the rest of the crew obviously don't want that. They say obviously that's not the case. You know, why is this child so special? You know, Reed's beforehand said he'd done lots of experiments and tests, and the baby was not going to have superpowers or wasn't anything special, but Galactus says that actually he is. So obviously they refuse, and so Galactus declares war on Earth and says that I'm going to come and devour your world. So then they go back to Earth, they tell the people, who then have a different viewpoint of the Fantastic Four going forward, because up to that point in the film they've been painted as these big heroic characters, the saviors, they'll do anything for the people. But when Reed reveals that actually we could have saved you, but we didn't because we didn't want him to take our child, they sort of turn on the Fantastic Four a little bit, and they've sort of lost the trust of their people. So you get a bit of conflict there, which is quite interesting, and that provides a lot of conflict between Reed and Sue, because Reed is very logical and at the moment can only see giving the child away as the only way of stopping Galactus, so considers it, and Sue knows that. So you get some good internal conflict there as well. Eventually, though, they do come to another realization that they might be able to teleport, because Reed has been working on a teleportation device, which does end up working, because he's able to transfer an egg from one side of the room to the other. He can maybe teleport the Earth millions and millions of miles away, so that it would take Galactus decades and millennia to find them. So that's what they plan on doing. So they build these little teleportation devices. However, Silver Surfer comes down, destroys those, and so then they have to think of another plan, because Galactus is coming. And when Galactus does come, Reed does come to the realization that maybe they could use the child as bait, and if they can't teleport the Earth away from Galactus, you could maybe teleport Galactus away from Earth, and that's exactly what they plan on doing. They use the child as bait for Galactus to land, get him into one of the teleportation devices and send him far away, and he'll be away from his ship, so he won't be able to reach them for millions and millions of years. That's the point, that's the idea. And so you get a big final confrontation where they fight Galactus. They obviously end up winning. There's a brief moment where we think that Sue's actually died because she used all of her energy up to push Galactus back into the portal. And so they do have a cop-out death scene with Sue, but we find out that one of the baby's special powers is that the baby, called Franklin, by the way, can bring people back to life, and so brings Sue back to life. And then obviously the day is saved, you know, all happy-go-lucky, happy ending. But then obviously we do get a couple of post-credit scenes which do tease the future of the MCU, but I'm not really going to go into detail on that. So if I was to sum up the plot, it is basically, think of Fantastic Four from 2007, Rise of the Silver Surfer, but in a more futuristic city, and add in the fact that there's a baby and Sue's pregnant with a baby. And that Galactus is done way better, if I'm being perfectly honest, in terms of design and actually getting to see Galactus properly. I think it's done a lot better in this one. So that's sort of a brief outline of the plot. Very generic, you know, like I said, you know, introduce the team, they go on a mission, the mission fails, they come up with a new idea, big battle at the end, they win, happy ending. Very by the numbers. Point A, B, C, like I said before. But it's alright. It's an alright movie, and it's quite entertaining, to say the least. But now I want to talk about the characters in particular, because it's the characters for me that sort of save the movie from being absolutely terrible, if I'm perfectly honest. So let's pause this, and I'll come right back, and I will discuss the characters of Fantastic Four: First Steps. Okay, so this section is on the characters, and this is really important, especially when you've got a team that are actually a family. You know, like I said, Reed and Sue are married and have a kid. You know, you've got Johnny, who is the sister of Sue. You've got Ben, who is best friends with Reed. You know, so they are a very tight-knit unit. They got a robot in this as well called Herbie, who I thought was really, really cool and cute. But yeah, so the characters in particular. I'm not going to do these in any particular order, but I have wrote down the characters. So firstly, let's talk about Sue Storm, played by Vanessa Kirby. Now, if I'm being perfectly honest, she is probably the weakest element of the movie. Despite her being one of the biggest parts of the movie, because it obviously all revolves around her being pregnant and her not wanting to give up her child, and ends up technically saving the day at the end, really, and sacrificing her life. But just because I say she's the weakest element, in my opinion, doesn't mean that she was terrible. She was pretty good, and you got to see, how, potentially becoming a mother at last after struggling for 2 years, I think they said, to have a child, has really struck her and shows that her mother instincts kicked in. And even though technically giving up her child would have been the more ethical thing to do, or, to save the majority rather than the minority in Reed's eyes as well, she couldn't, because her mother instincts had kicked in. She would protect her child at all costs. And it's not fair. Why should we sacrifice anyone? And I quite like that. And I thought that was quite nice for her. Seeing her turn invisible was quite cool as well. But I will say she didn't really have the best relationship with her own brother, Johnny. I felt like, and both me and my fiancé said the same thing, that Johnny and Ben had a much better relationship as potential siblings than Johnny and Sue, the actual siblings. I thought that was quite weird. They almost felt like Sue and Johnny were more like colleagues or ex-university or college friends who have finally come back together to work together after so long. But yeah, I thought Vanessa Kirby did a fairly good job, brought a bit of variety to the cast of Sue, but there just wasn't an awful lot for her to do, despite her being one of the core people of the movie, if I'm perfectly honest. Then you got Pedro Pascal, the big star who's playing Reed Richards. Look, he did a fantastic job as Reed Richards, if I'm perfectly honest. I thought he's definitely my favourite Reed. He plays the logical, the scientific, by the facts, by the numbers, really, really well. So you don't actually see him do an awful lot of his stretching. There is a few scenes where you do, especially when Galactus at one point is like stretching him paper thin and it's ripping his suit and damaging his bones and everything. You can feel his pain and anguish, but you can see him trying to be more emotional, because obviously he just thinks logical and thinks literal, and he's got to try and be emotional and be an emotionally available adult for his new son Franklin and be there for Sue and save the planet. You can see him with the mental turmoil and it eats him up inside, and I think they play it really well. There's potential for him to potentially, I think they were going along the lines of he could be maybe like autistic coded, but he is very literal and by the numbers. But that is Reed, and I think Pedro Pascal plays him fantastically. I love him so much. He is brilliant as Reed Richards, and he's probably my favourite character. I love him trying to fight with his logic, and him trying to find another way of saving the day without using his son as bait, but he can't find another way, and sort of begs his wife Sue to go with him on this and to trust him. All through the movie, he wants people to trust him. There's multiple times where he comes with a solution and Ben questions him. He says, "Please trust me." He wants Johnny to trust him, and obviously in particular he wants Sue to trust him, and I think that's really, really good. Also, I should have mentioned before, Sue's got a good relationship with a previous villain of theirs called the Mole Man, who's played by Paul Walter Hauser, who is really, really good and does help them out at the end, but obviously has a good relationship with Sue because she managed to come to a treaty with him, but still doesn't like Reed and the others, and there's a good little confrontation between the two where he basically mocks them. So I thought that was quite fun. Joseph Quinn plays Johnny Storm, and he was pretty good as well, to be fair. He does a good job at playing a bit more of a mature version of Johnny who wants to get involved but yet isn't fully respected, and I don't know whether that's because they don't think that he can truly contribute on an intellectual level, so to speak, because there's numerous times through the film where he says, "Oh, I've got this brilliant idea," or "I've solved this," and they're sort of like, "Yeah, good boy, Johnny," just carry on, the grown-ups are talking pretty much, and they don't fully recognise and believe him. I think they could have played off that more and potentially had him, maybe you had the conflict of, why don't you trust me? Why don't you listen to me? Why am I a joke to the rest of the team? They don't play off that enough. But I think Joseph does do a really good job, though, at bringing Johnny to life. And I thought the effects of his flame on when he's flying around or caught on fire is done really, really well. He has a bit of a fling with Silver Surfer and is constantly referred to as his girlfriend all through the film, so I thought that was quite fun. Then we've got Ralph Ineson, who plays Galactus, does the voice of Galactus. Really, really good. I love the design of Galactus. Galactus is really, really cool. The big booming voice, I love it. I think they could have done a bit more in terms of the size of him, because there's only like two sizes that you see in the film. You see him about the size of a skyscraper when he comes to Earth for the final confrontation, and then you see him maybe about double that size when they're on the ship. I think they should have done a bit more of a scarier one where he's maybe like the size of the Earth or something and then shrinks down. They could have had more of a fisticuff variant where he's literally the size of the Fantastic Four, and then, you know, realizes that maybe they might get the upper hand, so he's like, nah, stuff this, and gets bigger again. They could have played off his size a little bit more, but I thought he was really, really good. Like I said, design was perfect, and the deep booming voice he has brings like a wise but menacing tone to it. Julia Gardner plays the female Silver Surfer, and she doesn't do an awful lot in the film. I think she was a little bit wasted. She's just there, obviously, to say, oh, look, Galactus is coming. I warn you now, he will destroy your planet. She does help towards the end, mine, and Johnny is potentially going to sacrifice himself, and so she decides, because she's built a relationship with Johnny a little bit, and because Johnny at one point in the film was able to translate the language that she speaks and work out her backstory as to how she became working for Galactus, sort of got to emotionally connect with her, and so she then feels for Johnny and feels for the Earth, regrets what she's done, and so sacrifices herself to help push Galactus through the portal. So she does have stuff to do, but I just feel like she gets forgotten about a little bit. I like the look of her as well. She's really, really good. Really cool, really sleek, shines a lot. I like it. And then obviously finally, I mean, I can't forget the last person in the Fantastic Four, obviously Ben Grimm, The Thing. You know, he was who I was worried about the most and how they were going to play him. But I think Eaton does a really good job at playing him quite well. But he's not there an awful lot, if I'm being perfectly honest. He doesn't have a lot of like outbursts. Like usually when I think of The Thing, especially in previous ones, he's salty, so to speak. He's not fully happy that he is the way he is, and there was no moment of that in the film where he truly regrets, not regrets, but sort of is upset by the way he is. He's sort of like fully established, fully happy with it. He never has true conflict with anyone in the movie. He sort of just floats through the movie a little bit, and it's kind of unfortunate, to be honest. I grew on his look by the end. Same with the suits as well. I quite like the Fantastic Four, like comic book style suits. I thought they were done really well, but they were a bit weird that they looked a bit like sweaters and jumpers, if I'm being perfectly honest. But yeah, I think overall the characters were done fairly well. Yeah, and it was just a bit of fun. I don't think anyone was done fantastically, pun intended, apart from Mr. Fantastic. I thought Reed was done really well, but I thought they were just sort of all right, if I'm honest. They were all right. Nothing special, but nothing terrible either. However, the last thing I want to talk about is obviously the post-credit scenes and what I think they potentially might mean for the future of the MCU. So this movie has two post-credit scenes. One actually plays into future events. The other is more just another one of those like funny gags or like a memorial, so to speak, or a thing from the past. So the one that's not really vital is one right at the end. So once all the credits have played and the screen goes black, you can then see Herbie on the TV watching what seems to be like an old intro or opening for an old cartoon of the Fantastic Four with an old-fashioned theme tune playing. So I think it was just like a nice little nod to like the original Fantastic Four, original comics, original designs. So just paying a bit of homage, which I thought was quite nice. But the one that in particular that I want to talk about is the one that leaked online quite early, the one that I already knew about going in. And that is obviously a mid-credits one where Sue is now talking to a 4-year-old version of Franklin because 4 more years have passed. So Franklin has started to grow up a little bit now. They're reading a story together in the living room. She decides to go get another book, his favourite book supposedly. But on her return, she hears that Franklin's gone a bit quiet, wondered what's going on, and then you see Franklin staring on the sofa at this man who has just magically appeared in the room, who's wearing a massive green hood and has a metal mask in his hand. I'm of course obviously talking about Doctor Doom, who because we didn't see the face, I believe that's because at the time of this they hadn't fully cast Robert Downey yet. Either that or he wasn't available for that, and that's why we don't see his face or hear him. You know, it's just a tease, you know, a bit like they did with Thanos right at the start during Phase 1 of the MCU. Because we don't actually see Doom's face. You just see from behind and you see him holding the mask, which is off. But we know, because of the casting announcement, that that is Robert Downey Jr., who has arrived and is looking at Franklin. So there's and then it cuts to black and says the Fantastic Four will return in Avengers Doomsday. But there's not actually a link that tells us how the Fantastic Four ship appeared at the end of the Thunderbolts. So I'm wondering where we're going to go from there. But in terms of like theories into where I think they go from it, so has Doom arrived because firstly he's seeking Reed's help for something, and then he's going to trick him because obviously we know Doom is the big villain of the next Avengers movie, or has he arrived in order to seek out Franklin and plans on stealing Franklin away from Reed and using his power for his own means? That's a possibility as well. In terms of how maybe they get to the MCU and how we saw the ship before. Maybe it's because Doom stole their child, and so they're then traveling the multiverse in order to find him, and so crash land in the MCU. Who knows? There's lots of theories about it, and to where I think they could go from here. They played it safe by obviously not showing the face, in case they want to do another variant of Doom and not just the Robert Downey or something else happens. But I just personally believe that was probably because of the fact that either he wasn't available for the filming or this was before they finalised that Robert Downey Jr. was going to be Victor Von Doom. In terms of Doom's power level, will they be able to make him a bit more of a threat? Because obviously Thanos, in my eyes, has always been a bit bigger than Doctor Doom. But it depends on the version of Doom that you do. You can make him as strong as you want, really, to be honest. And obviously we have to try and tie up the whole Kang thing as well. But I'll be interested to see what happens going forward. It was not a very thrilling sort of post-credit scene we sort of expected to see Doom, if I'm being perfectly honest. I would have been shocked if you did a Fantastic Four movie and Doom didn't appear in one way, shape or form, because he's in all the other Fantastic Four movies, and knowing that Doom is the main villain of Phase 6 and beyond at the moment, it was inevitable we were going to see him. But yeah, so that's just my thoughts on the post-credit scenes. What would I give Fantastic Four: The First Steps if I was to give it a score out of 10? Look, I quite enjoyed it. Look, was it the best? Was it the worst? No and no. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. And I think I'm being fair here, is, you know, because it's a good movie, but it's not like an outstanding movie. It does a couple of things wrong, but I quite enjoyed it. You know, I quite enjoyed it. Would I watch it again? Yes. Will I be getting it when it comes out? Yes. You know, I will definitely watch it again. And would I recommend it to people? Yeah, go on. It's a bit of fun. It's definitely the most fun Fantastic Four movie, put it that way. But that's going to be my little discussion and review on the Fantastic Four: First Steps. Hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, please like it by giving me a thumbs up and comment down below your thoughts on the Fantastic Four and where you think it's going to go from here. And subscribe if you are new. But for now, this is the Nerdy Grail signing off. I hope you've had an amazing day, and I will see you all next time. Bye for now, everyone.